airwaves of FunAsia Radio. The wait is finally over. I was talking to you and I was telling you that I'll have somebody very special joining us this evening on the airwaves of FunAsia Radio, and that personality is with me. Let me tell you who that is. Joining us now on FunAsia Radio is entrepreneur, investor, and global thought leader Brock Pierce, a name recognized around the world for innovation in digital finance, technology, and the future of business. Brock, it's indeed a pleasure and great to have you here.
Well, grateful to be here.
So tell me, Sam, what's going on? How is Brock here? And I'm sure a lot of people that don't know, let me tell you that Brock Pierce, of course, began as a child actor appearing in the Mighty Ducks movie. 1992, that movie came out. Then the sequel, D2, The Mighty Ducks, 1994, and The First Kid in 1996. Right now, he's a prominent figure in the blockchain space, having co-founded the stablecoin Tether, which is USDT, and the venture capital from Blockchain Capital. He's also serving as the chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation. What a wonderful career and what a changeover from television to blockchain.
So Brock, it's very interesting to hear that every time, last week when you were talking to me and you were introducing me, I told you that I know a lot about you, reading about you. So tell me how someone goes from a Hollywood career to being an entrepreneur which disrupts the space and comes out with such an interesting original idea. What led you there?
Well, I started acting at the age of 3. So professionally, that's when my first memory in life takes place on a set, filming a commercial for the radio on television. So it's a radio station advertisement on television. And it was the message was, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. And so that's my first memory in life takes place on that set. So I didn't choose to be an actor. I just was. I was kind of born and raised in the business. And then eventually when I started making films at the age of 10 and then moving out to Hollywood, at some point now I'm starring in major motion pictures. And then you start asking yourself, you're in those developmental years, is this my calling? And I started asking myself, do I really want to be a movie star? And, it just wasn't the thing that I wanted to be. I felt that I was very entrepreneurial, technology, inclined. And so at the time, producing movies felt like the thing that I wanted to do. So I started thinking about how I would make that transition in an Orson Welles type of way into early film production. But at the same time, the internet industry is exploding in the stock market, 1996, 1997. And I said, it's an emerging industry. Why don't I just become an internet entrepreneur? And so I went to my management and said, I'm going to quit acting. I'm going to go become an internet entrepreneur. And they're like, are you crazy? What are your qualifications? What university have you graduated from? And, I made the decision to go do it. And I started my first business in 1997. I raised $88 million. I think I was the youngest internet entrepreneur in the world to create the first streaming media company. I basically said that the internet is going to disrupt television and cable, because you have broadcast and cable networks with a limited number of channels. The internet by nature was going to have effectively unlimited channels to be able to serve every audience group that didn't exist. We were user-generated content, original webisodes, invented most of those formats, and then licensed and repurposed. Now the problem is this was before broadband rolled out. All the analysts at the time said, high-speed internet's coming, it's coming quick. And it didn't come fast enough. So when the internet bubble burst in the spring of 2000, 99% of all internet companies imploded. And so all of a sudden I was on top of the world, and now I'm a college dropout, washed up actor, and failed internet entrepreneur, going, what am I going to do with my life? And I made the decision to go try and build another business, and my next idea was right. I decided that digital currency was going to be a big thing, and I ended up dominating all of the world's video game markets for World of Warcraft and Second Life. I had 400,000 people in China playing video games professionally to mine digital currencies. I was Google's largest advertising when their monetization emerged. I was PayPal's largest merchant for years. I was instrumental in launching Alipay for Jack Ma. And so that was the next thing, and I've just continued to, that naturally led me to crypto. Absolutely. If I'm the main guy running all the currency markets before there was Bitcoin, it's inevitable. Resistance is futile that I would end up in that business.
Well, that's an amazing story, Brock. So our listeners keep hearing about crypto, and they would like to know about crypto. What's new? What's coming? Where we are today?
Well, first and foremost, the underlying technology, in the same way that you're watching artificial intelligence and LLMs changing the world in which we live, this technology is also changing sort of the backbone of a lot of the infrastructure and how the world is going to function, because it's bringing efficiency and all sorts of wonderful things. Crypto itself is the kind of front end of the application. Think of Bitcoin as the first app and blockchain as the operating system. And so it's having an impact in terms of, certainly internationally, a very large number of people around the world are living in countries where they've got a lack of financial services, right? What we call financial inclusion, and clearly it's having a big impact. Take a look at El Salvador, for example. President Bukele bravely, courageously said, I'm going to embrace Bitcoin or this technology in El Salvador. Because only 30% of the population of that country had access to financial services. And in so doing, within 1 year, 70% of the population of El Salvador had access to financial services. When you think about the fundamentals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the odds of you finding happiness in your life, if you don't have your basic needs met, it's not just a roof and food. If you don't have access to financial tools, the odds of you finding success in life are nearly impossible. So the idea of bringing financial inclusion to the world is just one example of how this technology is delivering the last mile to places that otherwise haven't had it. And with that, you're also going to be seeing access to microloans, which we've seen with Grameen Bank in the past and Muhammad Yunus. But these technologies are bringing financial services to the last mile, of people all over the world, and that is one of the main use cases. Obviously, most people focus on how do I make money, what's the get rich, and I'm trying to focus you on why the technology matters and the fundamental positive impact it's having. Yes, people have made money speculating on these things and have participated in both the rides up and down in terms of its volatility. But there's something fundamentally changing that is making life on Earth better because of this.
Now, once again, for the people that are listening to us, we have with us Mr. Brock Pierce, a name recognized around the world for innovation in digital finance technology and the future of business, alongside Sam, our group CEO, and Vaishali Thakkar, our CEO here. I have a question for you from a layman perspective. This blockchain, how will this affect the regular person, the regular individual, not the investors, not the people that are involved in the money, but day-to-day life, general people? How will this blockchain affect them?
Well, that's part of what I was explaining. So when I would give speeches, actually, Americans would often criticize Bitcoin and try to have arguments with me back in 2013 and 14. And they're like, convince me why I should want it. I go, you shouldn't. And like, what do you mean? I go, well, it's not for you. And like, what do you mean not for me? I go, do you have a bank account? They're like, yes. I go, do you have a credit card in your pocket? Yes. I go, well, this isn't fundamentally changing your life unless you want to speculate on Bitcoin as a currency. Did you know at the time a majority of the world's population don't have those things that you have? These are the things that you take for granted because we live in a country where basic financial services are, and even in America, there's a lot of people that don't have those things, that rely on payday loans and a whole host of things that make it very difficult to ever find their way out of a life of poverty, right? And so fundamentally, it's in these areas. It's delivering efficiency and accessibility around fundamental things that you need to survive, right? Beyond that, if you're, a blessed American living in a blessed country and been blessed with, some form of abundance, you don't need it unless you want to speculate on the economic, upside of it. But then there's other use cases, and we could go on and on about what they are. But one other big idea that's not there, but to talk about where the future might come as we talk about this concept of Web3, and that is the idea that what was the most precious asset in the world for a long time? It was gold, right? Then it became black gold or oil, right? Sugar for a moment, this, that. But, today, what is the most precious commodity in the world? your data.
Mm-hmm.
It's your data, your digital DNA, your individual information. But how much are people benefiting from the value that they derive from their information? No, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the big data aggregating companies are the ones making all of the money off of the most precious commodity in the world, which is you. What Web3 theoretically can do is change the economic participation where you as a user can participate in the remuneration or the monetization of your information, where and as we talk about things like universal basic income, as the landscape of work is shifting with robots and AI, eventually people are going to need to participate in the economic value they create. And I believe that this technology will unlock that.
We have about 40 seconds. We have 40 seconds left before we hit the next commercial break. One, I think, closing statement before we go to the break. What's your one piece of advice to the world, to the ones that are listening and beyond?
Well, I think the most important thing right now is we're living in a strange period of time where we're at a fork in the road. You know, stay curious. The world is changing rapidly, and the path to a better future for you is to be engaged. Don't bury your head in the sand. Go start playing around with Claude. Go make sure that you're using these LLMs. Be a participant in the future. The future is going to happen to you or with you. Be the change you want to see.
All right, with that, Sam, I think it's time to say thank you to you, Vaishali Thakkar, and of course, Brock Pierce. It was a pleasure to have you all here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.